Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website Roll20.net. With this video, I'll be reviewing the 5e campaign Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, designed by Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy these videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. I went into this adventure not knowing anything about it. I don't know if for some reason I just missed the whole news cycle about what is going on here. Is this a remake of Lost Mine of Phandelver? Is this a long-awaited sequel? I had no clue going into it. So imagine my surprise and delight when I discovered that it is in fact both of those things. Actually, it is to use a video game term, a remaster, I think, of Lost Mine of Phandelver, which was the original 2014, not full-length campaign, but level 1 through 4-ish, maybe 5 adventure that is probably still considered to be one of the better adventures to come out of 5e. It's the go-to for, new DMs and new players to run. We ran it back, gosh, in like 2015 when it basically was our first 5e adventure. You can see that playthrough here on the channel. So obviously I have very fond memories, as do most of you, I'm sure, of Lost Mine of Phandelver. So this is half of it is a remaster of Lost Mine of Phandelver, which means it basically has got a new coat of paint. Didn't really change too much about it. And then the other half is a sequel to Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is the Shattered Obelisk, which continues the campaign basically from levels 5 all the way up to 12 and essentially turns it into a full-length campaign. And I'm here to tell you it is damn good. I was really enjoying reading about this story, and especially the emphasis on dungeon crawling. I think if you've especially been going through a lot of the more recent releases and like anthology stuff, and you're like, oh gosh, I really miss when we just did, good old-fashioned dungeon crawls. Well, holy crap, this one is almost nothing but dungeon crawls. In fact, it reminds me in a good way of Princes of the Apocalypse at times, where it was just big dungeons that were like interconnected with each other and had just really great, interesting like setups and creatures to battle. And in this case, the theme, which you may not even get that from the actual cover image here, which is from very early on in that second half adventure, is actually very Lovecraftian, very Cthulhu, very far realm. And it's interesting because I don't think we've really touched on that too much in 5th edition. It uses, and by the way, full spoilers, obviously, throughout this review, but the big bads at the end are basically mind flayers. Not basically, they are mind flayers, which I think is, obviously we've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, we've probably all been playing that, so I think that's been very exciting for everybody to jump in and witness all the mind flayer shenanigans, and they are used in full force here to really cool effect. Now, on the one hand, although it is a continuation of the Lost Mine of Phandelver story, do not expect it to actually tie in meaningful ways. That was one of my biggest disappointments, I think, is I'm thinking like, okay, well, we're going to seed all these interesting, concepts and characters that are going to play off later. That's really not the case. It's kind of disjointed, honestly. The only way they're really related to each other is the fact that it just happens to take place in Phandelver, and these poor people just can't catch a break. But I did like how you really do feel like you're saving the whole town. You've gotten a feel for these people, all the NPCs that you meet in Lost Mine of Phandelver, which do a good job of making you care about these individual people and their side quests and whatever. And now you get a chance to really save them from this horrible far realm threat where they're being like transformed and mutated and stuff from this ritual basically being enacted by the mind flayers, which they've sent out a bunch of agents to collect the Shattered Obelisk, including these goblins. So I'm going to go over this review. I'm going to mainly focus on that new second half because I think we're all kind of familiar as it is with Lost Mine of Phandelver. Like, I mean, it's so old at this point. I will go over some of the new stuff, which is cool, like the kind of the remastered things, which is basically new maps and new tokens, which all look amazing on Roll20 and just takes advantage of the more modern Roll20 bells and whistles, basically. But I'll be mainly focusing on the second half adventure because that's all the new content. So in terms of me, reviewing an adventure just for adventure's sake, we'll mainly be looking at the second half, which I guess we could call it the Shattered Obelisk. The first half is still literally Lost Mine of Phandelver, and then the second half, I don't know if you want to call that, I could probably just call it the Shattered Obelisk, but I'll be focusing more on that. However, the entire module, which is included here in my review version, is the full 8 chapters of Phandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk. The first 4 chapters are going to be Lost Mine of Phandelver, and then the second half we'll call that the Shattered Obelisk. This is the actual product you can get on Roll20 for $29.99, which is more expensive than the original Lost Mine of Phandelver. So it's, you know, it includes all of Lost Mine, which I believe is $14.99 currently on the marketplace, Roll20 marketplace, and then plus all of the second half stuff. To me, I think it's worth picking this up, even if you already have Lost Mine, if you're going to at all run Lost Mine again, because it's got so many better bells and whistles things. And I think the second half is way worth the price of admission. It is awesome, and I will show you all of that stuff. All right, so 8 chapters. Again, 4 from Lost Mine, 4 from Shattered Obelisk. 33 full color 5-foot square maps. Look at this. Feast thine eyes upon the amazing map art that continues. I don't know if it's Mike Schley. I meant to look that up. Oh, I feel terrible. I meant to look up the map artist, but absolutely awesome, full color, detailed map art throughout that is exactly like those cool Lost Mine of Phandelver art that we all love so much. In fact, we get some additional maps like Old Owlwell and Wyvern Tor, as well as all of the second half maps, which there are a ton of. I mean, that's literally the original installment of Lost Mine came with like maybe 4 or 5, I think, total. So that's awesome. Just absolutely incredible number of maps. We also get the regional map of Phandalin, the regional map of the Sword Coast, which surrounds Phandalin, which is slightly different because of the new locations, but it's still kind of your hex crawl map. So now you've got Zorzula's Rest, and then those 3 areas they have to get to in chapter 6, I believe, the Crypt, the Gibbet Crossing, and the Old Temple. It also includes over 50 magic items, 40 named NPC tokens and character sheets, over 100 just generic NPC monster token and character sheets, and over 50 player art handouts. That is hugely, bigly bigger than the original Lost Mine of Phandelver, which came with like a handful of player art handouts, about 20 different monsters, about a dozen different named characters, none of which actually had individual token art, by the way. Roll20 would just do the thing where it puts the names on there. So huge improvement right there. Also, you get the compendium. I guess I could actually go to this section to see what is included. The compendium, which includes over 25 new monsters and over a dozen new magic items. So the actual module will include all of that stuff, and then the compendium specifically, I'm referencing the new stuff, like actual new monsters or new magic items that are originally created for that campaign. About 25 new monsters and about a dozen new magic items. And then the art pack, which I've been really impressed by the recent releases from like Dragonlance on, in terms of the amount of art pack that Roll20 gives you, which is something of the line of like, it's 300 some objects, and about half of those are new tokens and half of them is new art. Basically, anytime you ever see any kind of art in the book, Roll20 makes a token out of it and also makes a handout, which is incredible. So it just adds like, 150 tokens that you can use for any purpose, which is really great. So huge amount of value already, way more content than Lost Mine of Phandelver for sure. So the new stuff that it adds in Lost Mine, again, you can see my review of that, see my playthrough. There's countless reviews of it. Lost Mine is almost a decade old at this point. Wow, that's weird to think about. It starts off with the players. They're escorting they're trying to catch up, I believe, to an escort, and they realize that the guy that hired them, the dwarf, one of the brothers, gets kidnapped by goblins. You go save him from a cave, which is the whatever the goblin cave thing is called, and then you end up in the town of Phandalin, and you have to deal with the Red Brand hideout and the Red Brands, and that basically helps clear the town of bad guys. And then you get a bunch of side quests where you can go to Old Owlwell, Wyvern Tor. There's like some orcs someplace. You can go to the ruins of Thunder Tree. There's a dragon there. There's a little bit of the dragon cultist thing, I guess, is a nod to that, back when that was a storyline as well. It's a lot of little side quests. I mean, the plot isn't that strong, but it's still very easy to run. It's just kind of, you can picture little yellow exclamation points above people. And I think it ends up being a very well designed adventure, considering the fact that it's not very heavy on story, which is, probably is the right way to take it. There's a few minor differences in like the layout of monsters. One I noticed here is like there's ogre zombies and dwarf zombies now in the Wave Echo Cave. And if you look at the original, which I have pulled up here, that is not the case. A bunch of skeletons in this room, for example. And then it's got like, I don't know, different token art is probably the biggest addition. I can go to the named NPC section. So like we get token art of Sildar, for example. All the Dwarf Brothers, Gundren, Nundro, all have token art. I believe the Mormisk has token art. The Drow villain at the end has token art. Glassstaff has token art. Like, none of these had art before. I think the Red Brands also, if we go to the Red Brand hideout, has art. And then even individual captives. Yeah, that's the actual, this is the bandit stat block, and then there's the Red Brands token right there. And the original one did not have any kind of art for that. And then we actually get individual artwork for the townsfolk captives, as well as for goblins. Goblins get individual artwork as well. If I can find whatever the goblin, is it the Kragmaw hideout? Maybe that's the one. Yeah, you can see where like a lot of the goblins are given individual art, which is pretty crazy. But again, Roll20 just takes like all of the, I mean, this looks a lot better than, let's see if I can pull up the original one. Kragmaw hideout than this. And I guess it's dark because of the dynamic lighting is currently on, and nobody has vision right now, which is why it all looks darker. But you can see where Sildar, this is the original Lost Mine of Phandelver, Sildar just has like a single bunch of words on it, and like no token, and all the goblins have that generic token art. And then you go to this one where they all have individual token art, and Sildar does have his own token art. So automatically, it's just better from a visual standpoint, which is why I use the term remaster and not remake. It doesn't try to change the story, doesn't try to change the dungeon designs. None of that is really changed. It just basically gives everything a fresh coat of paint and makes it look a lot better, especially on Roll20. And also, the Ruins of Thunder Tree, the original map was for 10-foot squares, which just broke everything apart and didn't really work, as people know. Like, you just can't play a game of D&D with 10-foot squares. What Roll20 has done, as you can see here, which is one method, is they basically doubled the size of the map, so it actually is 5-foot square map again, and everything is appropriately sized, which I do appreciate. We also get new maps, however. You get a map of Old Owlwell, which was not a map before, where you've got all the Necromancer and the zombies in the tower, and Wyvern Tor, which I believe is the Orc. You can see the Orc hideout here. Or is it, maybe it's Bugbears, I forget. It's been a hot second. But before, we didn't have any maps of any of that stuff, which is awesome that we actually got maps. So yay. And of course, Wave Echo Cave is the big map at the end. So again, it doesn't change any of the storyline. It still ends with this big dungeon crawl, which is maybe a little too open-ended, but you basically just fight this villain, you save the brothers, you restore the mine, and that's kind of the end of the story. And you know, the big bummer, the big disconnect here is if you were excited about seeing how they continue the story, well, they don't do anything clever. And granted, this story was like, again, written, you know, 10 years ago or something, so it feels weird, I guess, to continue it. But on the other hand, basically, to continue it, they just took Phandelver and said, well, let's just set another story in Phandelver. I think at one point they might tease the fact that there's another goblin tribe out there doing something, because the way the next chapter starts, which I'll go ahead and start talking about the new content, is that there's a bunch of psionic goblins who are now pestering the town of Phandalin, basically. And that's just, it starts in chapter 5 with these psi goblins basically doing a bunch of bad things around town, and you have to you know, do a bunch of little side quests, essentially. And that's in the Stolen Shards map here, which you can see the way it's organized. This is all under one journal entry. I probably would have preferred if they had broken this up into different ones. Actually, I don't know why they didn't do that here, because they did break up the maps into 4 different maps. So something I've seen like Pathfinder do before, Starfinder and whatever, is when they have like mini encounter maps, which I love. Give me those encounter maps. They'll put them on the same map here on Roll20, and then you just kind of have to shuffle the players around to different scenes. What Roll20 has done instead for this time is just to make individual map scenes for those. So it kind of makes your map area longer, and obviously makes it so that's why there's 30 whatever some odd maps here. But it's nice that you don't have to like worry about shuffling people around between different maps. Sister Garely doesn't have a token. I thought she did. I have to call you out on that, Roll20. Does she? Oh, she really doesn't. Okay, she's like the one. Look at that. She's like the one person who doesn't have her own token art. Why does Sister Garely not deserve her own token art? That's not good. Okay, there's like 1 or 2 more that don't, but most of them, like 90% of them, do have token art. Whereas before, if you see the old Lost Mine of Phandelver and the named NPCs, yeah, Villagers of Phandalin, 0% of them actually have token art, which is a bummer. And I believe things like Glassstaff and those have some kind of generic token art to go with it. So you go around and do all these different investigations. You discover that the goblins have been stealing all these little shards of the obelisk, and these obelisks, of course, we've seen them pop up several times now in Rime of the Frost Maiden, Tomb of Annihilation. I believe there's one or two other adventures. Somebody on the comments will be able to let me know where exactly these obelisks pop up, and they all have different important. They're not the focal point of any of the campaigns, but they all have a crazy big role in those campaigns that could be big or could be ignored. In this case, it is the MacGuffin item. Basically, the villains, which are the Mind Flayer, this one Mind Flayer cult, is gathering these obelisk shards, which this one obelisk is broken up, in order to power this big ritual that's going to transform Phandelver into a colony of Mind Flayer. It's just a big old one-time Ceramorphosis deal without having to do with the tadpoles or anything. So that's a bummer for the folks of Phandelver, and obviously it's cool because every time you go back in between chapters, things are getting weirder and people are starting to mutate a little bit, and like as the Far Realm energies are getting them, and it feels like you're actually heroes trying to help, the town and help solve things. There's missing people being kidnapped. I don't know. I really like it when the players, because there's a lot of adventures where they go off into some other land and then they just have to go through dungeons and you don't really get to feel like they're being heroes or just being like hack and slash looters. And while that is definitely always part of the game, to me, I do like it when you let the heroes get to feel like heroes also, frankly, and get to earn their hero-ness by saving a town in this case. The investigations will eventually lead to Zorzula's Rest, which is an awesome dungeon. Just to give you an example of how cool these dungeons are. This is an abandoned Dwerger mining camp that is now taken over by the Psionic Goblins, and this is, I believe, their 6th level by the time they get to this dungeon. So the whole back half gets to be cooler because you're tier 2 now, right? The entire last man of Phandelver was tier 1. You end up at about level 5 to where you start this new Shattered Obelisk at 5th level, and then you get to do a full, tier 2. So that's, I guess, moving to tier 3 with level 12 at the end. This one is really cool, though. It features a lot of undead, unique Dwerger called the Ashenwright. There's repairable mining lifts and conveyor belts you can take to get to the next level. There's a friendly Dwerger spirit canopic jar thing you can free, and I believe he can even help you on his quest. He also has an adorable little picture right there. I don't know why he's a friendly Dwerger, but he is, which I love. I love that all these do this, by the way. They all have like some kind of, they just check all the right boxes, right? When I'm looking at a dungeon crawl, I'm like, all right, obviously you're going to have combat. Do you have good exploration? Are there things players can do that don't involve combat, that are like puzzles or traps or like these mechanical things the players can operate? Just like some kind of interesting thing that they can do that's not combat or social. That checks the exploration box. And then, of course, do you have social encounters? Is it just wall-to-wall monsters, or are there chances to talk to people or rescue people or whatever else? And all these dungeons, I think, satisfy all of those things. There's a giant badger named Bessie that the goblins have befriended that, of course, the players can befriend. There's a mini boss fight with a giant sentient, like, demon drill, which is fucking cool as shit looking. Look at this token. Also, it's, like, spilling out over the token. And then the actual boss fight is even in this extra arena called the Indigo Sanctum, where you fight essentially the boss goblin, who is powered by mind flayers, and that's where you realize he summons a spirit guardian, which is cool. Or, sorry, a shield guardian. And then you learn that he's actually being commanded by mind flayers to grab these different shards, and then you get a cool opening of the quest where you get the last instructions he got, which was, hey, go to these 3 locations and get the Shattered Obelisk piece from those 3 locations. And that's chapter 6, is going to all these different areas. There's the cool, of course, player map the players can get, which is by the goblins and tells you where they are on the map. And this is very much like, it reminded me of Prince of the Apocalypse, where the dungeons are like all interconnected with each other, and it may be even that the players don't quite know when they've left one and entered another one, which is pretty interesting. And then one of them, I believe, is designed to be done last, although the players could still stumble into it and do it. But they consist of an old dwarven temple just crawling with mutant cultists, and as well as like a Medusa and some drow that they can befriend, because one of the drow's father, they're a bunch of brothers. I think it's Talendarith. Is that the location of the temple? Yeah, there's a bunch of drow the players can talk to because their dad is a cultist and has become like half mutant. And these mutants are crazy looking. Let's see if I can show you some pictures of the token art. Yeah, humanoid mutate. I mean, look at this. That's crazy. You want to talk about like Far Realm nastiness and like horror? Like, you're gonna get your body horror here for sure. And that's the big plot, which is really different from a lot of the D&D 5e campaign adventure. So Cool there. There's a haunted dwarven crypt with a hydra and ghostly hauntings that can affect the players. Was it this one also that had the cool thing you could turn? Yeah. Okay, so something I have not seen, I think, since Tomb of Annihilation with the Gears of Hatred. So if you played Tomb of Annihilation in Roll20, then you remember the Gears of Hatred, the actual very, very far, one of the final levels of the massive Tomb of the Nine Gods, actually had gears that the players could rotate, like an old school Myst puzzle, basically, and they could only get to, or video game puzzle, and they could only go through certain paths as it rotated. And then in Roll20, they let you actually rotate the map. Well, guess fucking what? Roll20 did that here, where you can take this thing and rotate it around. How cool is that? I love it. That is so awesome. It's fucking cool, and this isn't even the only one where it does that. There's another one also where it does it. Also, these are locked, which is the UI for that is annoying because it's a huge thing. But that means you can't accidentally move it around. But what you can do is sit here and rotate it. I think you have to hold Alt to make it stick there. But that's a really cool feature. I love it. I think that's awesome that you can actually physically rotate. And I like that it's cute that they put on the map. Hey, rotate this on the map layer. This is obviously on the jam layer here. Really cool dungeon ideas. There's also an Underdark passage full of monsters. There's Earth Elementals, Grix, Chain Devils, Zorns, Basilisk. That's the third location of Gibbet's Crossing. Like, you wanted to get all your dungeon crawling on. It's just awesome. And you could tell this was a 10-foot square map that they then subdivided into 5-foot squares, which is why it's a little bit bigger here, but there's like a whole plot where they have to figure out how to shrink this Darren's Instant Fortress, which is blocking the path between these two different areas. And in order to get the crystal that you need, you've got to be able to deal with that. So I think it's really cool. And then once you've gotten all these obelisks or haven't, which it actually matters by the end and determines how hard one of the final boss fights is, determine how many fragments you're able to get, then you discover the location of the Mind Flayer cult, which is Illinok, which is located beneath Phandelver. So now you get back to Phandelver, and all the creepy shit is happening to underneath Phandelver. And trying to figure out the picture. I guess they don't have a picture for that one, do they? Maybe it's chapter 8 with there. Nope, that gets too far. Okay. Well, Illinok is another. It's a cool Mind Flayer dungeon. There's a dying infected elder brain there, and a large sinkhole in Phandelver is what lets you get to here. And then you have to take all these it's a very video gamey dungeon. You have to get through all these far realm rifts in the dungeon, which are 3 of them, in order to gather the keys you need to then unlock the path to the final dungeon. All of it, especially as a video game fan, all of this makes perfect sense to me, and I really dug it, and it works really well. One of them is like a beholder layer, but the beholder's been corrupted by the Mind Flayer and their cult, so it's some kind of thing called an Orculus or something. There's a Grick or Grell feeding realm and a Slod spawning area. And of course, the whole thing is just madness inducing, and there's just far realm mutants and shit everywhere. It's just getting crazy. And then once you unlock that final path, that's all chapter 7. Once you unlock the final path, that gets you to the chapter 8, the final, I guess one of the final dungeons, which is the Briny Maze, which literally looks like a giant brain. And the final thing is a pool where you have to dive into the pool, which is guarded by a purple worm. And of course, there's all kinds of shit in this dungeon. And that takes you to the Endless Void, which is another section of mini dungeon encounter areas that Roll20 has helpfully broken up into separate maps. And then you can just have your players go through however many you feel like you want them to go through. But they have to do, I think, at least 4 or 5 before they can actually get to the final area, which is technically not the final boss fight, Ilvash's Anima. The final boss fight is once you take out the Mind Flayer cultists, the 3 main uppity ups, and you think you've destroyed everything, then you come back through the portal, and then you fight the actual final boss fight here at the end of the Briny Maze, which is the really crazy, let's see if I can get to it, the Ilvash's Refraction, this thing, which is nuts. You look at the stat block for this, it's a glorious CR15 that automatically breaks concentration on all of its attacks. Of course, it's got the Mind Flayer Mind Blast and all these resistances and immunities and 200 hit points. Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving me a satisfying, awesome final boss fight. And of course, if the players haven't taken down the purple worm, it joins the fight as well. That would be nasty pants. I really, really like this adventure, especially from a pure dungeon crawling standpoint, with just really cool ideas, exotic locations. I think it does the the whole Far Realm thing very well, because the Far Realm is literally, you're like going through this endless void where you're just appearing in all these floating islands that are creepy and have messed up stuff about all of them. I mean, one of them is like a kraken they have to fight basically. Like it's crazy. And it does the Far Realm justice, I think, in a way that I haven't seen any of the 5e stuff really do it, and really combines that with D&D, which is dungeon crawling, I think. Not a lot of dragons in this one, but you get a lot of dungeon crawling and a lot of cool, like, mutant, nasty things that are happening, and kind of builds and escalates until you finally save the day. And there's even some cool epilogue stuff where, like, different creatures can come back and, get their revenge, or you can, like, continue the story in some ways. A really good way for the campaign to give you some notes on how to allow, like, just different things to happen if your characters aren't quite done with the story, or want to be able to continue with these characters, or do other things. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with this adventure. I would love to run this adventure, but I mean, we already ran Lost Mine of Phandelver. I guess you don't have to run Lost Mine of Phandelver to run this adventure. That's probably the biggest advantage to having it be disconnected, is because you could just start off with, like, hey, remember Phandelver? Well, there's a bunch of Silent Goblins who are, like, attacking that town, and just go from there. You can just start everybody at level 5. You can start at 5th level, and at that point it becomes, well, Lost Mine of Phandelver is the best way to get them to 5th level because it takes place there. But if you already played that, then maybe you do something else, to get or just start them off at 5th level and be like, look, here's the campaign. Because I think it's absolutely worth running. I think it's really interesting, and it's full of dungeons, and just feels thematically similar to Lost Mine, which was just, doing dungeon crawls basically, and doing what D&D does best and 5e does best, while still having a lot of those best practices of, like, okay, the dungeons aren't just mindless hack and slashes. There's actual, like, puzzles to do, and things to uncover, and objectives, and NPCs to interact with. They're well-designed dungeons. When I say about how much I like dungeon crawls, it's not just having the sexy maps and creatures everywhere. Like, there's a big difference between a mindless dungeon crawl and an actual well-designed, like, oh man, this is so cool, we're in the middle of this dungeon that's just got all this different stuff going on. It's very memorable. And in fact, there's, like, I like one of the end ones, I think it's Illinok. You can literally walk into the entrance and, like, talk to the guard mind flayers, which I love. Like, I like that that's an option. Like, players don't think that would be a thing, but you could, like, use deception or bluff, because they're expecting people to, like, bring them the shards of the Obelisk back. So you could even try to talk to them a little bit and work with that. There's an Alhoon, I think is what you call it, which are it's like a lich mind flayer who's totally friendly. He can talk to you. He hates what's become of his home, I guess. The Elder Brain's infected, and these other, uppity up mind flayers think they're so good. So it's fantastic. I just like that mix of having some, like, fun, surprising NPCs to be able to socialize with. And then of all the Roll20 editions, which is, you get all these, well-organized journal entries. As I said, just dozens and dozens of magic items, creatures, characters. I really like that they've added this tips page, which has been here for a while. This is mainly for new DMs and players, where it just works you through how to work out. I don't know why I'm minimizing these windows. I don't need to reference them again. How to move players around different maps, how to use multi-sided tokens in case you add some shapeshifters, how dynamic lighting works, how the GM layer works, how to switch between all the different layers. That's really helpful. Also, this, which may be the first time I've seen this, I don't remember if they had it in Dragonlance or not, which is the dynamic lighting example page. They did have this in Marvel. If we look at my Marvel RPG, obviously it was a different map because it's a fantasy map, but this basically showcases how the lighting works in Roll20, how you can set up light sources, how you can actually look at the light layer and see how you can do two-way lighting, examples of how to make barriers and windows make sense, how to do hidden doors. This is actually pretty clever, how to do arrow slits, which is you do a one-way lighting, which I didn't think about doing, so that the outside can't see in, but the inside can definitely see out. That's a good way of doing it. So really helpful here, that I expect will be on all their releases going forward, is this lighting page. Obviously, this is only going to be relevant if you are a Roll20 Pro subscriber. If you're a free user, then you don't have the dynamic lighting capability. But if you've been using Roll20 for any time, then I trust you are using that, because it's a really, really great feature. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Shattered Obelisk. If I can get to let's look at, what map do we want to look at? Zorzula's Rest, I think, is still one of my favorite maps. It's just fantastic. Here we go. Pro, it remasters Lost Mine of Phandelver with more maps and better token art. This is a better version of Lost Mine of Phandelver, even if, for whatever weird reason, you don't want to use the second half of the adventure and you just want to use it for Lost Mine of Phandelver. You could do that here. Now, granted, you're paying more because this is more expensive than Lost Mine of Phandelver is currently, but you get way better tokens. You also get you get more maps. You get maps for Old Owlwell and Wyvern Tor, and then I believe the maps are all properly subdivided. Like, it's just a better product overall. I think it's a new map for Goblin Ambush as well. Like, all of it is just better than the original Lost Mine of Phandelver. So I would still very recommend doing this if you're doing Lost Mine of Phandelver, is running this version of it. Pro, new chapters that provide an exciting dungeon-heavy Tier 2 adventure. This is of course, the Shattered Obelisk adventure, which is just awesome. I love this adventure. I can't say enough good things about it. I had really no big complaints other than one you'll hear me say in the con section, but I think it is absolutely stupendous. I just love all the things in these dungeons. I love the color, the lighting, the story is better. Like, the Far Realm thing is really cool, which is another a pro of mine, is excellent use of Lovecraftian themes and the Far Realm, where it starts mutating all the townsfolk and you really have to start saving them. And it's a whole little mind flayer splinter group that's worshiping this godlet of a Far Realm entity, and they're doing this, huge thing in the Far Realm. The players have to race to get there. Like, it works all better as a story, and even better than I think Lost Mine of Phandelver ever did as well, while still making it very easy to run. It's just, I think dungeons are easy to run for DMs. It's just, here's your dungeon and here's the rooms I need to go, and there you go. And this one is a lot of that in a good way. Pro, over 30 full color detailed maps, all 5-foot squares. Some of them obviously had to be subdivided to make the 5-foot squares work, but none of them were like the 10-foot, 20-foot, whatever bullshit that previous 5e releases have done. This one finally does it right, and honestly, it looks absolutely amazing on Roll20 because of that really great map art, and there's so many maps. And granted, some of them are tiny maps, like Spawn Hollow, Labyrinth of Eyes. These are smaller. Labyrinth of Eyes is the other one I should show. This is the other one you can rotate. Not that map, the map layer. There we go. This one you can fully rotate, and this one's actually the cooler one because it actually all lines up to like these different areas, which is awesome. This reminds me really of Tomb of the Nine Gods. Very cool. Some of them are smaller, they're just like encounter world maps, but I'm still going to count that as a full map. Like, it's still cool. Like, it's there. I'm glad it's there. And they give you, even though all of these are like one room areas, like, they're still just really cool, memorable map art that looks just really awesome and neat. So I'm absolutely going to count those as all individual maps. These are still pretty big size maps. And Pro, the Roll20 tips page and dynamic lighting example page are hugely helpful for new users. That's going to be something that's going to be standard going forward on all the Roll20 releases, and I'm really pleased they got it. I remember when the Roll20 tips page became a standard thing, and I was really happy to get that, and now the dynamic lighting example page, which is also a huge thumbs up from me. So my only con is that the second half doesn't tie into the first half. Really, the only tie-in they have is that the second half does have to do with Phandalin, and it does it in a good way, right? You have to go back to Phandalin frequently. It's not like you just use that once and you go off and do all these adventures. Like, it very much feels like you're heroes of the region, which I think is a tier 2 thing, to where you are, you're investigating all these missing people and disturbances around town that leads to the Psy Goblins, and then all of a sudden the people start getting infected, and you have to investigate that, and then all of a sudden the sinkhole opens up in the bottom of, like, whatever they called, the Giants Inn Tavern or something, and you have to go down there, and that's where you find the Mind Flayer, dungeon, and that eventually takes you all the way to the Far Realm. So you really feel like you're helping Phandalin, you're dealing with them. All that's great. It's just a bummer that didn't quite tie into, and again, maybe I missed something, but I didn't see, for example, like, if that Nesnar the Black Spider was actually like an agent of the Mind Flayers, or something that would have at least tied in. That's, if I were running this from the beginning of Lost Mine, that's definitely something I would want to tie into the larger picture, is have it be, Lost Mine can still end, that chapter 4 can still end, but then have it be like a cool tease at the end where it's like his brain's racking, or maybe he's partially mutated, or something's going on that makes it interesting. But instead, it's like they just decided to write another story that's way different and cool, and just happened to set it in Phandelver, which, it's fine. It works. It's still a good adventure. Final verdict. As both a remaster and an expanded sequel, the Shattered Obelisk elevates Lost Mine of Phandelver, already one of the best 5e adventures into the must-play campaign for 5th edition. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Brian, Corey, Rico at 1337, Big Nut, John F, John L, Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake Counselor, Andrew, Daryl, the Reldron, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, and Jason. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Carolyn, Jerry, and Thomas. Thank you all very much for your support.